It is a brand new edition of Flyers Daily. How about for the 10th of June, 2024 Flyers Daily? As always, presented by Ticketmaster, Make More Memories Live. I don't get to use the word potpourri very often. I remember that used to be a topic on Jeopardy quite often. Joining us on this edition to discuss a potpourri of topics from PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. Did you always enjoy the potpourri category for 300, Bill?
It was a great category.
Because you had no idea what it was going to be.
Exactly. Could be anything. So.
I actually played hockey against Alex Trebek. How about that?
Oh, really? Joe Watson told me a story because Joe played on the Hollywood All-Stars team.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that Alex Trebek was the only Canadian he's ever met who couldn't skate and had barely played hockey in his life.
Yep, he was not a very good player. I think it was probably, I want to say 1987 or 1988. They had a celebrity all-star showcase, and it was at the Spectrum, and a group of high school all-stars played against, and we had this big party with all of the celebrity guys, and Alex Trebek was on the team, Rob Lowe, Chad Lowe was on the team, MacGyver, Richard Dean Anderson played as well. So that was quite fun way back in the day, and Joe is absolutely right. Alex Trebek was not a great hockey player. He was a great host of Jeopardy, but he was not a great hockey player. Yep. Bill, before we kind of get to the potpourri of topics, let's start with a kind of an off-the-wall one. The goaltending performance from Sergei Bobrovsky in Game 1. It's why I contend that the position is the most important position in sports. The player never leaves the field of play unless, a delayed penalty is called or he gets pulled. But Bobrovsky was absolutely the difference in a game where Edmonton was absolutely the better team.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, you look at the final score and if you didn't watch the game, it was deceptive.
Yeah.
But it's, and then at a certain point, particularly within a series, how we often talk about how every series takes on its own personality. If you have another game of that, then all of a sudden Bobrovsky's in their heads.
Yeah.
And
that's a problem for a team because they start trying to get too precise.
Exactly. I mean, if Edmonton stays focused on get your chances, and with the talent you have in their roster, some of them will start to go in. But that was an absolutely phenomenal performance in Game 1, and it also shows you that sometimes it only takes that one playoff run.
Yeah.
Because Bob really never had a good playoff run until he was 30, right? And nobody talks about that now because he's been starring. He deserves the attention he's been getting. So, so it's I think it speaks to the fact that especially with goaltending. I mean, it's so crucial, but it's also so unpredictable too.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest elements for him, Bill, is just that they learned how to manage him through a regular season to manage his workload and his energy. And I mean, when I'm watching a goaltending performance like that one in that game, and there's a lot of odd man rushes, there's breakaways, to see a guy just head down on pucks the way he was and reading, like the breakaway, I think it was in the first period, a little chip pass, and he just stays down to his glove side. It's just so incredible to watch. I mean, then the sliding, just barrel roll thing that he pulls off is just desperation. It's just awesome to watch. I just love the way that position is played. These guys are he's a total freak of an athlete. Yeah. And just like skaters, Bill, you're a crap playoff performer until you're not.
You're not.
And then, right. I mean, look, the way he's performed the last couple of years, second cup final now, if they go on to win it, and God forbid he would win a Conn Smythe, he's really knocking on the door of Hall of Fame status all of a sudden.
Oh, for sure. You take the Vezina trophies, you had a cup, and presumably with a Conn Smythe trophy, if they win it too. I mean, the credentials are there. It's has all the highlights in there, and climbing up, and then in the win category too for his career as well. So I mean, he certainly is building a case.
Yeah, to me wasn't as dominant, has never been as dominant as Carey Price, but he's got some hardware that Price doesn't. He may end up with some hardware that Price doesn't have, and Price is going into the Hall of Fame. Bill, let's get to our potpourri of topics, because first and foremost, Bill Daly, the Deputy Commissioner of the NHL, and Gary Bettman. Excuse me, I had a hard time thinking about who the commissioner was. But they had their pre-Stanley Cup State of the League address, and one of the things that came out of it is that the salary cap is going to be at 88 million, slightly higher than projected for this season, probably in the ballpark of 92 and a half, maybe 93 the year after when the Flyers will really clear some cap space. But 88 million for the first substantial jump in a long time, it is pretty substantial.
Oh, it is for sure. I mean, as you said, it wasn't too much of a surprise during COVID, the years following after that. It was kind of, there wasn't much liquidity in the system. Hang tight, and the cap will start to increase again. The Flyers still have to manage it well this offseason. You want to tie yourself into things that you're paying for down the line when the cap does increase. So, sometimes when there's a little bit of wiggle room, I think it's that much more important that you stick the course with whatever your particular plan is, because Keith Jones said it the other day, and he was completely right. These upcoming decisions the Flyers they have to get those right. Yeah. That's absolutely a big part of the next step of the rebuild is to identify who's going to be here, who you want to go after, and make the right calls on these guys, because that's going to determine A, how well the rebuild works, and B, what the timeline is for it to work. So
yeah, they can't act like we do when we find money. They can't just go, oh, I found this money, I'll go buy a new car, or I'll go and just luxury spend. This is when you have to remain really prudent in how you do things, and two contracts in particular. Obviously, the Travis Konechny one is one that we've talked about, but also up for an extension will be Cam York. He's got another year remaining. He's at 1.6 the second year of that 2-year bridge deal. He will be an arbitration-eligible restricted free agent, I believe. And he's another one. I mean, maybe you wait and do that in season, kind of like you did with Owen Tippett, because you do have some control there. He's not going to UFA status. But if he plays the way he did last year and continues that arc of development, he's going to earn himself one hell of a raise.
Oh, without a doubt.
How about that value on $1.6 million last year, Bill? Holy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the tricky parts in doing a rebuild too. You want to have guys in their first or second contract who are playing important roles. And in York's case, I think he's going to play even more minutes next year.
Agreed.
Be in the mid to high 20s, in terms of minutes played, and coming off of 30 points, you're looking for 40 to 45 a year from now. If he hits those marks, he's in line for a significant bump in salary. But it would be one that ultimately, a guy you'd like to tie up for long term, because ultimately, if he keeps progressing as you envision that he will, it could only be a pretty good contract. It ends up being a bargain on the other end. But clearly the value that he provided this past year, or he's not in line for a raise yet, but a guy like Forster. I mean, you need guys like that who contribute on entry level or their second contracts, who provide a lot of value, but they're not yet exploding, on your cap picture. So yeah, absolutely, it's crucial, and it's another one too that the Flyers, you don't want to overspend, but you have to figure long term on a deal like that one.
Bill, they can gain themselves a little bit of relief. They do obviously have candidates for LTIR. Danny Briere spoke at the Combine the other day on a litany of topics, including Ryan Johansson, and that just seems murkier than ever. He has 1 year left at $4 million. To me, that doesn't look like a likely buyout candidate in my estimation. If I'm looking for a buyout candidate, I mean, I guess the candidates are Cal Peterson, who just spent the majority of this past season with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. As a matter of fact, led them to the second round, played decently in the playoffs. You look at, like I just mentioned, Ryan Johansson, or you look at Cam Atkinson. I don't want to retain on a deal, and I don't want to attach a sweetener to any deal, and it looks like Cam's time may be up here. Is he the likely candidate for a buyout, and is that something you see happening?
With Cam, there's 1 year left in his contract. Just based upon the way that buyouts are calculated, I mean,
2/3.
And so it's it would be 2 seasons as opposed to just riding out the final season of it. But there's I think there's 2 factors in here. Yeah, while the cap savings aren't phenomenal on him, I think you'd save about 1.78 million if I looked at it right on his cap this year. But it would cost you another 178 1 year afterwards when he'd otherwise be off the cap. But it's also just a question of doing right by the player. If he's not a fit here anymore, and you can't move him, and as you said, you probably have to sweeten it at this point to move him. You're not going to get value. The team's going to want you to A, retain half probably, and B, add assets to it as well. So a buyout might just be the best way to go for all parties involved. With Peterson, I think they'll ride out that last year on his contract. You save 1.1 million on it. You're still on the hook for another 4, but it's only for the 1 year. That would be one of the salaries coming off the books in a year, as opposed to if you buy him out, then you're absorbing about $1 million or so for the year after that. I don't see where that makes sense. Even if Peterson is the backup for the Phantoms, and hopefully
he's still your call up if you get an injury though, because he's got experience. Yep,
exactly, and you don't mind him having as the backup either. If he's sitting for a couple of weeks because of an injury, you deal with it. So I don't see him. I don't see him being bought out. And as for Johansson, as murky as that is, he can't buy out an injured player. The rules don't allow it. And how injured he actually is, who knows? Who knows what's going on with any of that? I suspect the Flyers are saddled with that contract for the remaining year. If he spends it on long-term injured reserve, it's going to be what it's going to be. But if there's one buyout candidate this year, it would probably be Cam. And one thing is that after this year, you have some start coming off. Like Tony DeAngelo comes off the books.
Yep.
A year from now, so you have a couple of years of dead space still to go on Kevin Hayes. You might be able to get rid of Ryan Ellis's contract, just because teams like Vegas, teams sometimes like Tampa Bay, they look for those contracts to stick on long-term injured reserve because they take advantage of it in the playoffs. Yeah. So you're able to leverage that space and make a move for to get that allowance to exceed the cap. So maybe you could make a move with that for the last couple of years. Otherwise, he has 2 more years, I think, to go after this one. So Keith Jones did say they want to have less dead space, less retention. But with Atkinson, I think that might be the way to go. Otherwise, I think that's as far as they go in that regard.
Bill, how firm a believer are you? I'm a big believer that doing right by a player like Cam Atkinson, if he doesn't have a role here, you do what you can. You buy him out, you let him move on. He still clearly wants to play. That injury at 34 years of age in a missed season took obviously a big toll on him. And he's been a bit of an underdog player his entire career and has carved out one hell of a career. And he's a great guy and a great guy in any room. To do right by a player, I think those things go a long way in the word of mouth amongst players in this league. And, you may not see a return on that investment of doing that solid to Cam Atkinson now, but I think you do end up getting a return on those type of things.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's been, when you talk about historically doing things the Flyers way, that was when if you go back to Keith Allen, he did that for player after player who'd been loyal soldiers. What he tended to do, whether it was Moose Dupont or it was Joe Watson or it was Ed Van Imp, when they were kind of at the end of the line, he typically would sign them to a 1-year contract beyond their current deal. Please make sure they were taken care of. Ask them, you can either be a part-time player here or you can go somewhere where you're going to play more. Most players chose I want to play. And, where might be some places you'd be interested in going, and then try to work out a deal with one of those teams. And that was part of why guys left on good terms, why other players wanted to come. That the Flyers took care of the guys who took care of the organization. That is part of the way of doing things the right way. If you do right by those kind of players who've been, productive players, but be good, solid citizens and guys who've done their part in moving you along, right, and wherever you're trying to get to. I do think those things pay back in the long term. I do.
Yeah, I agree. Bill, about this time last year, We always thought there was an unspoken moratorium on general managers making significant moves at this time of year. You don't want to take any shine off the shiniest trophy in sports, in the Stanley Cup final. But on June 6th of last year, in 2023, I think it was kind of the announcement, really, of Danny Briere on that day, because that's when he swung a big deal. It was the Ivan Provorov trade, and it kind of caught us all off guard because, we're not looking for things like that to happen right before the Cup final. And he sends Ivan Provorov to the Columbus Blue Jackets, 3-team deal with the Flyers and Kings and Blue Jackets. He sends Hayden Hodgson along with him to the Kings for goalie Cal Peterson, Sean Walker, and Helgi Grans, and a second-round pick in the 2024 draft. And then the Flyers also traded Connaughton to Columbus. We had all the retention that came and everything out, how it played out. But that move 1 year later has paid really big dividends for the Flyers. And much to, I think, your and I's surprise, the damage of losing Provorov was way more mitigated than maybe we thought it was going to be on June 6th of last year.
Without a doubt. We were just talking about Cam York. Yeah. York moving back to the left side, his natural side, and moving up to the top pairing. I mean, that opened a big door for him. So that created something in that regards, right? In terms of the return the Flyers got in the deal, I mean, the Flyers had to take on like Peterson's salary. That was baked into that too, but that's finite. That has 1 year to run on it, and and Sean Walker gave the Flyers 3/4 of a very good season, and then they were able to leverage that for an additional first-round pick a year from now. So, the Flyers got a lot of value back in return.
Yeah.
And I think that in the middle of a rebuild, that's really what you're looking to do.
Yeah.
And then part of it too, I think an aspect of this trade too was the dressing room became a tighter knit group too.
Yeah.
After the trade as well, so it worked out. It worked out on a lot of fronts.
We're gonna look back at some point, and Michkov hopefully is that centerpiece guy, but there's going to be two really important moves as part of this rebuild. That one by Danny Briere, and I think we're going to look back at that Claude Giroux trade, even though it looks like, hey, the Florida pick may be 32nd in the first round, a diet first-round pick, if you will, this year, but also to get Owen Tippett out of that deal. Boy, what a good haul that is for a player who was expiring, and Florida ended up getting bounced rather quickly that offseason. Danny Briere also spoke, Bill, from the Combine on Jamie Drysdale, and talked about a procedure he had to have done, lower core, it sounds like, not nearly as invasive as kind of what Giroux and Gostisbehere went through that one offseason. Matter of fact, I believe he's at 100% right now, which is great news. He finished the season on the ice, but Danny did say he was limited all year in his ability to skate and his movements. One of the biggest issues going into this season, and one of the biggest, focal points for us will be Drysdale. Not only his availability, but his development, Bill, because the guy that he was traded for is going to be in the league this year full-time in Cutter Gauthier. And I can see the Twitter back and forth going already. You can't measure the players the same way because one's a goal-scoring winger and the other one's a defenseman. But it is a big year for Jamie Drysdale. He played 81 games really in his first full season, but he's only played about 41 or 42 cents.
Yeah.
That was 21-22.
Yeah. And I mean, I think clearly he has a lot of development to go.
Yeah.
Right?
He needs to be Brad Shawed.
Yeah. and Shaw can only help. And there's still adjustments to go to the Flyers systems. We've talked a lot about man-to-man versus zone coverage, and that was a big adjustment for Drysdale, and he only got part of the way through it because he got injured and missed a lot of the stretch drive. And a lot of it, too, is just the organic growth of a young defenseman. And I think it was our previous episode we talked about how much patience you really need with defensemen because they take longer typically than forwards to develop. So I think that's the biggest part is you stay patient. And, I don't think you can worry about Cutter Gauthier because he wasn't going to be here.
Yeah.
Right? And that's part of it too. Well, you're getting what you can and making as much of a hockey trade out of it as you can. part of it as well too is the assessment is a long-term thing. I mean, if you remember, and this is a draft decision, but Cole Caulfield against Cam York, and that's become a big fodder for Twitter and social media, and you saw York take the step he took this past year, and and who knows, maybe Cole Caulfield will become that 40-plus goal scorer that he's been predicted to be, and he's had injury issues and whatnot, right? But maybe he'll hit that mark, but you look at the end of this year, it's certainly looking like a much wiser decision for the Flyers than than a lot of the assessment was the previous year. A lot of this can kind of change year to year. Look at it 5 years out and see if there was a better hockey trade to make. We'll see how Drysdale turns out, and again, I mean, it was never how it was envisioned, but Gauthier simply wasn't going to play here, and it did not make sense to force the hand of, he could have played his junior and senior years, and you could have made him wait till August 15th, I think, 2016. That's a zero-sum game. You're not gonna end up winning on that one. And the further you go with a player unsigned, it becomes a diminishing return. That's the biggest thing too.
Yeah.
So
asset.
I think that it certainly is a big year for Drysdale in his development for his long-term, the long-term picture. But I think even after this coming season, I still think he's not going to be a totally finished product as a complete player. But certainly you want to see his skating back up to 100%, and you want to see the offensive side, because that's the number one reason why he was such a highly rated prospect in the first place, was figuring this guy is going to be a power play one defenseman. Brings that element of puck movement, good ice vision, which we saw a lot of hints of those things.
Yeah.
But I hope in the year to come, other than good health, is you want to see a little bit more consistency in a lot of those things, and it's an important year for him in those regards too, staying on the ice and showing development beyond what he was by the end of the season.
Bill, one of the things that deal did create, though, is you traded a forward, a guy that you had slotted in your organizational depth chart as a forward. You trade him for a defenseman that is an NHL roster defenseman, and now you have to figure out what the trickle-down effect of that is. Danny Briere also spoke about Eric Johnson, said he could be a candidate to come back in that, 7-8 type, that kind of Mark Stahl role of last year, where he's kind of your first guy off the bench, a veteran guy you can put in there if you have injuries, or a guy just needs to take a look from upstairs. So by my count, I mean, that leaves Sanheim, York, Sealer, Drysdale. I'm assuming they want to re-sign Yegor Zamula and Rasmus Ristolainen, who missed a lot of time last year. There's some word that maybe they are going to extend Adam Ginning, but where does he fit? What about Ronnie Attard? Is this an indication of how they feel about him? And also, to some degree, Emil Andre, who kind of put them to a little bit of a test last year, played 4 games with the Flyers, but maybe needs another year in the AHL to really ripen up properly.
Yeah, and with Attard and with Ginning, you have the waiver consideration, because those guys are no longer waiver exempt. If you were to send them to the Phantoms, they'd have to clear waivers, and not a guarantee that either would clear. I thought Attard, he had the AHL All-Star year previous year. I thought Attard was a better all-around player this year. Maybe a little streaky in the offensive side, but I thought defensively as an all-around player, I thought he was a better player this year than he was the previous year. And I know he's a little bit of an older prospect, but he has the big shot. He could improve the accuracy a little bit. I don't know. I'd like to see him get a long look in camp. And Ginning, I actually thought played pretty well at the NHL level, and has developed kind of along the lines where they thought. Whether I don't know. I mean, I would like to see. I'd like to see another young player have a real shot at a roster space. Andre, you don't have to rush if you don't feel he's ready, because there's no waiver consideration this year.
Yep.
I thought on the power play side particularly, I thought, and mind you, it's the American League level. I thought offensively he was kind of pretty much as advertised as the season went along. He's a good offensive defenseman. Absolutely, can play a power play. Even the NHL level, I think he could play on power play. In terms of defensive side and overcoming some of the size issues, that still is a work in progress. If he were to be a guy who comes up in the middle of the season or whatever, I don't think that's the end of the world. But I do worry about blocking a guy who it's kind of now or never for, I like Eric Johnson. I thought he did a pretty good job late in the season. I thought he did a much better job than some people want to give him credit for doing. As a matter of fact, but I don't know. I don't know. In another full season, I don't know. I understand all the intangibles he brings. We saw firsthand what a pro he is. What a guy who even being around the team and for a short period of time kind of has had his finger on the pulse. And if there were to be an injury, and I'd be comfortable, as your six, moving into a third pairing, killing some penalties, those kind of things. But I'm just reluctant to see a younger defenseman block when you're in a rebuild. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with you because I go, okay, if there's an injury, yeah, you can put the sage veteran in there, but an injury also opens up an opportunity. Yeah. And that's where I'd like to see a guy come up and let's kind of find out a little bit more on some of these guys. Bill, what are we thinking of Elliot Desnoyers at this point? Desnoyers, because he had the really good rookie season in the AHL. Yeah. Really didn't get his legs under him last year. And when we kind of project out where he fits in the NHL, what's the path here for Elliot?
It was a night and day difference because he was right. I mean, right on the cusp, right?
Yeah.
He was coming into camp, coming off of such a good rookie year, the American League, and I think it's something that Lappy talked about too. At the NHL level, although he led the Phantoms in goals as a rookie,
24.
That's not necessarily going to be his role in the NHL.
Yeah.
Lappy kind of saw him as a good bottom six forward. You kind of move him around, have him play a little center, play a little wing. Good penalty killer, good speed, and could contribute some offense too. Starting with camp, really from rookie camp onwards, even some of those, even the rookie games against the Rangers, he just never got going.
Yeah.
Now he's gone from on the cusp, I think, of a roster spot to looking at starting another year with the Phantoms. He's not waiver eligible yet, but I think he'll go back to the Phantoms to start. But this is kind of, let's be honest, it's a make or break year for him.
It is.
And if he's going to get back, if he's going to get back onto the radar as a prospect, I don't know at this point that he's going to do it as a center. It might have to be on a wing. And I think, I don't want to say reclamation project this early, but it certainly is a year where he has a lot to prove.
Yeah.
And certainly you're not going into this year saying he's going to play X number of NHL games after not playing any this past year. So crucial year. I'm hoping he bounces back.
Yeah. We're not that far away from rookie camp and prospects game and all of that coming up in July. And there's still some guy. Tuamala is another guy. It's going to be an interesting story this summer and coming up into the fall. A lot of that. Bill, let's wrap up on this one. Let's have just a little bit of a fun one. This just popped into my head when I was kind of putting some ideas, pen to paper, on things to talk about in this episode, in this potpourri of topics. Who's most likely to lead the Flyers in goals next year? The candidates that I came up to the top of my head are Tippett, Konechny, Forster, and I put Michkov in there because we don't really know if he's coming over, but you never know. I'd love to see him battle all three of those guys for a goal lead. But who's the most like? Is it still Konechny or is it Tippett?
I think
Tippett finished with 29 last year.
Yeah, he's still looking for that first 30 season, and certainly the ability is there to be a 35, even 40 goal guy. But I think this year has to happen. If it's going to happen,
yeah.
If he still is at 27, 28, 29, and kind of stagnating at that level. Nothing wrong with that kind of a player, but if he's ever going to lead the team, this would be the year. I still think Tip is a little streaky for my liking in terms of, he'll put a number of goals in a short period of time, and then 15 games later he has another goal or two. I'd like to. I'm going to go with Konechny until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
But hoping that this is the year where Tippett takes that next big jump into the mid 30s, to flirting with the high 30s.
Yeah, I don't know if Forster's ready to get to the 30 mark. I think he's in that 26 to 28 range this year.
Yeah.
But I will tell people, I'll tip my hand right now. One of my bold predictions will be that Tippett will not only get above 30, but that he'll score 35 or 35 plus goals this season. I agree with you. I would like to see him be more of a factor when he's not scoring, and to me, I'd like to see him initiate a little more contact because he's so big and so strong. I'd like to see him be more impactful, even if the puck isn't going in the net. But I'll never have a problem with his, desire to shoot the puck because he shoots it a ton. I'd like to see him rub a little of that desire off on Forster, who, in all fairness, in the last third of the season, shot a lot more. But he's got a wicked shot as well. So you'll take Konechny, I'll take Tippett, and we'll bet a hamburger on it, and we'll see who comes out on top. You know what's going to happen, and Michkov's going to come over and lead this, get 41 goals. Yeah. And then we'll go out and we'll charge Danny Briere for the burger. But it'll be a damn good burger. All right, great stuff, Bill. Read Bill's work at PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. Bill will be back next week. We'll be back Wednesday. Flyers Exit Day will continue with Nick Seeler. So join us then on a brand new Flyers Daily.